Hi, my name is Amber and today I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up. To keep my wrap-ups in the order of the books that I have read them in, like the book I read first in the month and then so on and so forth to the last book I read, but I really wasn't keeping track of what books I was reading and what order I did because I really wasn't planning to do a wrap-up this month, but at the last minute I changed my mind. So there is no order to this because I can't remember which book I read first. So I apologize if that's something that you like, to see the order and all that stuff. But either way, this is the first book that I want to talk about that I read in August is Auschwitz: A New History by Lawrence Rees. This book is a non-fiction about Auschwitz, mostly its origins and what its first purposes as a concentration camp was, and how their decisions, what they would consider logical decisions, led up to it becoming a death camp. It was just very interesting actually because there was a lot of things I did not know about the concentration camp that I think a lot of people actually don't realize about it, especially the beginnings and how it became. Like, we all know that it was a death camp, but we just don't really go deeper into what Auschwitz really was. And it was very interesting and it was very enlightening because of the fact that there was a lot of things that I just never heard or learned about. I really appreciated the writing of this book because it was very reachable to the average reader. Like I said, it was a very enlightening read. I really appreciated the effort that he put into this book. I could see it all the way through, and I gave it 5 stars. I would highly recommend it to anybody who hasn't learned a lot about this subject because there's a lot of things that should be known about it because I feel like we only touched the surface. Then I worked through the first 3 books in the Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin. The first book is A Game of Thrones, A Clash of Kings, and A Storm of Swords. This series is kind of hard to explain, but I'm going to try. It's fantasy, that's the genre of this series, and it's about people being for the Iron Throne, while in the midst of it, the others, a type of zombie and wildlings, are encroaching onto this world, and it's gonna start causing chaos, and it all kind of stemmed from the death of a certain person. I really, really love this series. It was really great to revisit the first 3 books. I was rereading them so I could get on with A Feast of Crows and A Dance with Dragons, and I just loved revisiting and getting to know the characters again and to remember where I left off, which wasn't actually all that hard to do. When I got to the 3rd book, I was kind of skimming because I remembered basically everything that was happening, and I just really wanted to get to the 4th book, so super excited. The series is not over with. There's going to be at least 3 more books that are going to be coming out in this series, so I'm super excited. The 6th book will be coming out hopefully in the next year. I don't know. We have not a date, but the cover is out and the title has been revealed, so I'm thinking that it could be coming out pretty soon, because usually they don't give that out until they're almost ready to actually publish it or give you the date. So I'm just crossing my fingers. If you can't tell, I gave each book 5 stars, and so far the series on a whole has 5 stars to me. The next book is Further Chronicles of Avonlea by Ella Montgomery, and this was a library book, so I had to return it. If you do not know about Anne of Green Gables or the series on a whole, or you just haven't read the book series yet, maybe shouldn't read this book if you've been eyeing it, which not a lot of you probably would be, unless you've read the series, because reading it you're really not going to know much about the environment. But I feel like you have to have a connection and a love for those books in order to appreciate this book. And even the fact that I had that connection, I really didn't like this one at all. I think if I had known that it wasn't going to have Anne or any of her friends in it, I would have been upset. But the fact that none of the stories were surrounding her or her family and friends kind of upsetted me, because that's what I was expecting. I was expecting it to kind of either have several stories about her, or it was going to be about her friends, which was kind of the assumption when I got this book. So I was very disappointed. Overall, they were okay stories. I didn't read all of them. I did read a few, and the ones that I did were enjoyable. There were actually some funny ones in there, but overall I was just really disappointed. So I gave this one 3 stars. Then I also borrowed the Unabridged Journals of Sylvia Plath. I was really excited to read it, and I didn't finish it all, but that's just because I can only read so much of other people's journals. I don't know like why, but I can only read them so much, and then I have to take a break. And I was like, you know, it's kind of bad for me to be borrowing this and then have that kind of thing be there with me. So I was like, I'm just gonna take it back and then find a cheap copy of it online, and then I would be able to do my style of reading when it comes to journals. So I got 75 pages in, and I really love her writing and just kind of getting to know her through her writing. Although I kind of feel like she, even in her journals, she's hiding away. Like, she talks about herself and she talks about events, but I feel like she's talking cryptically and in riddles, and I'm really enjoying it. And you could just totally see the writer in her in this. It's just so beautiful. Then I read The Help by Kate Stockett. This is about Skeeter, Aibileen, and Minnie. They are the 3 main characters. Skeeter is a white privileged woman in the 1960s, Jackson, Mississippi, and she just graduated from college. She majored in journalism and writing, stuff like that, and she's trying to get a job in that area, and she wants to write a book. And then you have Minnie and Aibileen, African American maids working under white women who are very racist and prejudiced against them. And Skeeter decides that the book she wants to write is going to be on their perspective, and it's basically about all of that and Skeeter's romance and stuff like that. Chick lit, I believe, is supposed to be naturally fluffy and light and just pure entertainment. You know, you're not supposed to take it all that seriously. And so when an author tries to take a very serious subject as the civil rights movement and the effects of being a black maid in a prejudiced and racial environment, and try to move all of that into the chick lit format and try to make it all light and fluffy, it's not going to work all that well. And this book was a very huge testament to that fact. I didn't realize that this was going to be chick lit when I got this book. I thought it was going to be like a very serious with a little humor in there to kind of balance it out. You can't make something as what these women had to deal with in that time fluffy. You cannot do that. It just doesn't work. And then we have Skeeter, and her as a character really annoys me. I mean, she might have changed, and I know in the movie she did change, but in the movie I didn't feel like she was that ignorant. Like, she was ignorant to a point, but I didn't feel like she was so ignorant that she would keep pushing this on them. And the thing is, this Skeeter was so ignorant and naive and just had no clue. And the fact is, when she was a kid all the way up to her teenage years, she would visit her maid in her part of the town. And it's like, how could you not see the way that they live and how it was for them in their part and compare it to your part and not see anything? You know, it's just ridiculous. Like, she had to have realized, and she's supposed to be this really smart person, and yet she's that dumb not to realize. And then when she goes to read the laws, and this is what really annoys me, because she's like, oh, it's not friendly, but it's not threatening. And it's like, yeah, on the surface it is, but she didn't even put it in the context of what these people had to deal with when it came to those laws and what would happen and how it made them feel, because yes, it was very threatening. I mean, the consequences of just doing something that anybody else would consider, you know, their right, and they try to do that, they could be killed for that. It's just kind of ridiculous that she wouldn't consider that threatening, and it's just really frustrating because especially because she was very selfish. All she wanted was to get her book written and published so she could make money off and make a name for herself, and she really never considered them and the risk that they were putting themselves at for helping her. And then you have the book itself, and I thought this book was supposed to be about how the maids dealt with working for these women, the type of jobs it really was, the money, the treatment, and all this, and then it just turned into a gossip fest. And I'm just like, this is really ridiculous, and I'm not really sure what the author was really trying to do. It's like, were you trying to really make light of this subject? Because if you are, you're making yourself look bad, but if you weren't, then you really did a poor job, and I'm very disappointed because I really liked the film, and I thought the film, although now that I'm thinking about it, there is some issues with that when you read the book and then you see it, you can see it more clearly, and it's just like the film actually made it feel a little bit more serious than the book did. And like, I don't mind humor in a serious situation. I mind when they try to take the subject matter and try to fluff it up, and this is what that author did, and I was very disappointed. So I gave The Help 1 star. I tried to read Bad Monkey by Carl Hiaasen. This book is supposed to be funny and I guess a parody of the typical mystery crime fighting book, but I really didn't consider it funny. The humor I felt was in bad taste, and the writing was bland and boring. It kind of put me to sleep. It was just not something I was really expecting from this book, and I will probably never ever read another Carl Hiaasen because of it. I just feel like this guy really doesn't have the greatest kind of humor. I don't really think it was in good taste, and he just was disrespectful in a way in my eyes. He was kind of disrespectful, and it was just disgusting to me.
Like, this is not my humor. I don't really care for that. And if you're gonna make fun of a dead body, go do that somewhere else. Like, I don't want to read about that, you know, so it was like big and no.
So I give it a 1 star, but the last book that I'm going to talk about that I read in the month of August is Jazz by Toni Morrison. And this book is about Joe and Violet, a married couple, where Joe kills his teenage lover, and in a rage, Violet decides to mutilate the dead body at the funeral. This is all set on the back of the book, and it's basically told right at the very beginning on the first sentence in the first page. So that's not a huge spoiler or anything. And it's basically about the after effects and what led up to it and all this stuff. The best part about this book is the writing. In the foreword, the author talks about how she wanted to make the writing feel like jazz and the music of that time, and she did an amazing job in that. I loved it. I love this kind of writing where it's just so beautiful and it kind of flows, and it's just wonderful. But I think it flowed too much, and what I mean by that is that she would go from like one point, she'd be talking about Violet or Joe, and it would just kind of change into this whole 5-page ramble on the city and what it looked like and what it felt like and the musicality of it all, and you would totally get lost in all of that and couldn't really find your way back to the story, and like it was very rambly and very distorted in that sense. It's just like you really never really got to know the full story. There was not a lot of depth to the story because of that, and you never really got to know the characters, Joe or Violet. So it was really frustrating because although I really loved the writing, I just really couldn't get into the story or the characters because of how rambly it was. So it was just so disappointing. I had to read this for class. We're working through it, and I'm gonna have to write a paper on this, and so it's just really disappointing because it's harder to write a paper or discuss things that really you don't feel connected to or anything like that. So hopefully it all works out for me. But anyways, I gave this 2.5 stars. So these are all the books that I read this month. If you read any of these, tell me what your thoughts are. Do you agree or disagree with what I said? And also, what books have you been reading this month? I would love to know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.